Our Father is the scariest Blumhouse production I've ever seen. Here's my review of the new Netflix documentary, Our Father. In the late 70s, early 80s, Dr. Don Cline was one of the country's leading reproductive endocrinologists in the field or specialty of IVF fertility. He was even celebrated nationally because his treatments were effective. Infertile couples would come from all around Indiana to his boutique office in hopes of getting pregnant, and they were. He had a high success rate. But one day, Jacoba, the daughter of one of Dr. Cline's former patients, questioned her parents as to why she had blonde hair and blue eyes and they didn't, why she looked so differently than her parents. And her mom told her that she was actually conceived via IVF, to lay these concerns to rest, that she was inseminated, and that her dad was her father. Well, that didn't sit well with Jacoba, so she eventually ordered a 23andMe DNA test for confirmation. She initially reached out to Dr. Cline, but he was adamant about not providing any details or information about that procedure. Lo and behold, her dad isn't her father, but the family tree linked to people nearby, strangers, and one thing led to another. And she had siblings nearby in Indiana. She eventually discovers that Dr. Cline is her father. He eventually claimed that he only used samples sometimes, and that she couldn't have more than a few siblings. That was a lie too. Jacoba started digging and digging, and she made sure that she only reached out to potential siblings who were at least 18 years old, who were adults. She reached out, and she really put an investigation together to see who out there could possibly be her siblings. She wasn't getting any help from Dr. Cline, so she basically did this on her own. On the screen, you'll see that there's a ticker, and the more she finds her siblings, the more the ticker goes up. So it went from 3, 5, 6, 14, 23, like it was just ticking up and up and up the more she located siblings. So he was lying. Red flag, obviously. And the more siblings she finds, the more those siblings find more and more and more. And so Jacoba contacts the Indiana Attorney General's office. She got an initial response back, but they claimed they'd look into it, and she basically didn't hear from them again, completely ignored. Then she reached out to the district attorney and was just blown off. She reached out to national news outlets, and they weren't interested in the story either. She was getting dead end after dead end. While watching a local news program, she realized that the one person she hadn't reached out to was Angela Ganote from Fox 59. Angela, ended up being virtually the only one who was really serious about helping her. And Angela digs into this story and takes it very seriously, investigating it. She's eventually threatened by Dr. Cline, who says that he would take action if his name was used. So the initial story that Angela Ganote runs talks about the story, but dances around who the perpetrator is. So they mask him, they keep him anonymous. But she refuses to let up on this story and continues to work on it for over a year. And Jacoba eventually gets a chance to have a phone conversation with Dr. Cline. She presses him and presses him and presses him. She eventually gets to talk with him on the phone. She records these conversations, and that's how we hear his voice in this documentary. She ends up meeting with him and some of the other siblings, and it's as if he's interrogating them as if they've done something wrong. I mean, he has pen and pad and he's asking what their professions are as if he's ranking them, so that he can feel good about what he's done. I mean, it's sick. So Angela Ganote and Jacoba are continuing on with this story. Well, Dr. Cline wants to sit down with Angela Ganote to kill the story, and he meets with her and threatens her. Like, he brings a gun. He doesn't point it at her, but he makes it intimidating. He even asks if guns are allowed in the restaurant where they meet. She's okay. She takes security, but this is just really strange. And one of the siblings, I believe it was Jacoba, the tire lug nuts from her tires were removed, like as if she was being threatened by Dr. Cline. They don't know this definitively, but it was just odd that all of the lug nuts were next to the tire. Anyway, Jacoba does record these conversations, so we hear his voice and we hear him admit that he's done this, and he feels like he was doing this as a gesture, like this was a gift to his victims. That's what he believes. He quotes Jeremiah 1:5. He's an elder in the church. He, as far as everyone in the community knows, he's an upstanding doctor in this community, and he pleads with Jacoba to let it alone, not because she has that she is psychologically damaged by this, but because this story could ruin his marriage. That's what he claims. So he doesn't want his wife to get wind of what he's done. That's why he wants the story killed. And she pleads, she says, I need a resolution. I need to get this out. I'm damaged by this, and he doesn't care. So in this documentary, it's interviews and it's reenactments and the voice conversations of Dr. Cline, and it's court documents. We hear from his nurse of 13 years. We even hear from his ex-business partner. They both contend that they had no idea that this was going on. His nurse, in fact, says that she would take lunch sometimes, go across the street to the hospital that was right across the street from their offices, would go there, collect samples from these medical residences, these medical students, protect them in her bra, transport them back to the office, and prepare for insemination, because to her mind, this is how it was done. This was the procedure. So she would collect these sperm samples and transport them back to the office to prepare for insemination. She had no idea that Dr. Cline was assaulting all of these patients. The patients thought that they were getting these samples from medical students. That was the agreement. Medical residents. That was the agreement for the insemination. They never agreed to being inseminated with their doctor's own specimen. And it's unclear what Dr. Cline did with these samples, whether he destroyed them, saved them, or used them sometimes. It's unclear what he did. What we do know is that he would, on the property, use his own specimen while his patients were, spread eagle on these examination tables waiting for insemination. He was in his office or somewhere on this in this doctor's office, providing his sample, unbeknownst to the patient, which is so unsanitary, like so disgusting. Like, I'm surprised they couldn't get him on that. Like, that sounds like it's wrought with malpractice that he could get away with this. This is beyond the pale. Many have said that it would have been better to have the viewpoint of the immediate or direct victims, meaning the women who were inseminated with Dr. Cline's specimen without knowing. And I agree to some degree. I agree that it will, there are some who voice, we get to hear and who are interviewed, but all victims of this act are not always willing to go public with it. This is humiliating. It's such a violation. Not everyone wants to come forward when something like this egregious happens to them. So no, we didn't necessarily have to hear from them to understand the grief and the violation. The children are also victims. They're going their whole life thinking that their father is one person and isn't. That's fraud. And he also has passed on ailments that they also didn't ask for. Like, they didn't ask for this. This is such a violation of them too. In that way, they too are victims. This is psychologically damaging on them all. So I understand why Jacoba is such a presence in here. She's the one who really got the ball rolling. And some of those victim patients were interviewed, but it's possible that the others did not want to be in a Netflix documentary or on Fox 59 on the local news and so forth. Some people want a more private life. I mean, this is humiliating. This is a violation. This is disgusting. So I'm okay that people who didn't want to be a part of this documentary, victims who didn't want to be a part of this documentary, aren't. Now, there is this one section of the documentary I want to warn you about. It's around the 50-minute mark. In 1963, Dr. Cline had accidentally killed a little girl who was riding on her bike in her neighborhood in the street. He was distracted, took his eyes off the road. He's in this long, looks like Lincoln or Cadillac or Buick, and he runs her over. Most of this documentary is full of reenactments, interviews, and so forth. But this is a reenactment. It's staged, but they do show you the blood. So keep that in mind if you don't like seeing that those kinds of scenes. And I think it was his ex-partner who reduced that accident down to Dr. Cline wanting to bore all these children to replace the one he killed. No, sir. That's the subplot of Don't Breathe. This was a maniac who sexually assaulted, sexually violated women, his victims. This is not some godlike donation, or this is not redemption. What he did was pure evil. Other theories was that he wanted a pure white Aryan race, and someone else mentioned that perhaps he was part of the Quiverful cult. No matter what it is, it was evil. It was evil. Dr. Cline was a serial rapist in my eyes, but not in the eyes of the law. There's no federal law prohibiting doctors from secretly inseminating patients. not rape, not fraud, not battery, not assault. It was found that because some of the patients knew they were being inseminated but not sure where the samples were coming from, that what Dr. Cline did wasn't exactly illegal. At that time, there were no laws on the books preventing doctors from doing this. Former district attorney Tim Delaney was rather rude and arrogant to Jacoba, who was pleading with him to do something, to charge Dr. Cline with something. Delaney contended that he couldn't get a jury to convict Dr. Cline on sexual assault or fraud, and he wasn't willing to write a bill of indictment to do so. He was not willing to try him. He said, "I'm not going to write anything like that down." So the law wasn't on her side. In May 2019, the governor of Indiana signed into law Senate Bill 174, the fertility fraud law. It's 2022, and there is no federal code that protects women from this fraudulent, non-consensual insemination. Now, there was a federal case against Cecil B. Jacobson in the 90s in which federal prosecutors believed he had secretly donated his sperm to unsuspecting women, fathering at least 75 children. Jacobson was convicted of perjury and fraud, specifically mail and wire fraud, because he had sent bills to his victim patients through the mail. That's what they got him on. And it's been decades, and there's no federal code. Dr. Cline was convicted for lying about his semen, obstruction of justice. He was fined $500 and had his license revoked. He served not a single day in jail, so this was in essence a slap on the wrist. As far as I know, Dr. Cline was never sued civilly, so yeah, it's a slap on the wrist. He fathered more than 94 children in Indiana and counting. His children and victim patients are psychologically damaged forever while he skated. Nearly 4 dozen doctors have been accused of secretly inseminating unsuspecting women in the United States. Thank you so much. Until next time, peace.